All right, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Hey Guys. All right, so we're going to explore variables in Onshape, uh, why we use them, how we use them, and hopefully by the end you have a pretty good idea about what we're doing here with that, and it's going to make creating your cams or any other kind of thing that you're going to create in CAD a lot easier to adjust sizes and maintain uniformity of shape. So that's really the big issue with, or the big reason why we would want to use variables in our designs, because if we need to make some changes, just small changes, but we want to keep our proportions the same, or maybe we want to just be able to adjust part of it while the rest of it remains the same. Uh, this is where variables really come into play. So, for example, if you were creating chairs and you wanted the chairs to all be the same, but you wanted to have them in different sizes, like you see on the screen here, but they're all exactly the same chair. If you use a variable when you're creating that, then it's really simple. You create the chair once using variables for your measurements, and then to change the size, you change the variables. So let's get into it and we'll see what happens. So I created this cam right here. And if I needed to change the size of this cam, we all know that I would just go to the sketch and I'd go to edit. And I'd look at the sketch and I would change the sizes. But if I wanted everything to stay the same in terms of its proportion to each other, but I wanted to say increase the size of the big arc to say a radius of 2 instead of 1.25, well then I have to go around and I have to figure out the relationship between the 1.25 and this relationship, which is pretty straight 1-to-1, but then also from the radius of 1.25 to the small radius of 0.25. And now it starts to get a little bit more complicated. And you can see where if it was something more complicated like a chair, there'd be a whole lot more to change. So this is really where variables come into play and make a big difference. All right, so where do we find the variable tool? Well, I think I showed you before where the plane tool is. If you hit that drop down, that seems to be the catch-all for everything that they couldn't figure out where it could go. And down here near the bottom is the tool called variable. So if we click on that, we can see that we have a number of different things to create this as. We could create a variable that's an angle or a number or really just anything, but we're going to go with length for this. And we're going to call this first one nominal size. So if you're familiar with coding, you know that in many programs, you can only, they will only accept like a single word. You can't have two words. So you can't have spaces is the bottom line, right? Sometimes you see where they'll use like an underscore to separate the words. But what we're going to do is we're going to keep the first word in all lowercase. We're going to call that nominal. And then we're going to just capitalize the second word. And we're going to call that size. And we call that camel case because like a camel, there's a hump in the middle, right? So the second word gives the capital S gives us our hump. So we call that camel case or bumpy case sometimes. So if we set that nominal size to be the 1.25. Now, why the 1.25? Well, first of all, that seems to be an easy number when we consider that the small radius was 0.25 and the big radius was 1.25. I'm sorry, not 1.25, 2.5. That becomes there all the original dimensions are a factor in 2.5. So 1.25 goes into it twice, 2.5 goes into it 10, 0.25 goes into 2.5 10 times, And that's going to be the big deal. So when we get to using these variables, we can use them in a mathematical expression, but it has to be in terms of being able to change the size uniformly. We have to have either our mathematical formulas either have to be multiplication or division, right? It can't be like nominal size plus 2, because then when we make nominal size smaller, it's still plus 2, and then the proportions get weird. So it has to be either division or multiplication. All right, so we're going to create that first, and then we're going to create another one. And now that it's on the top of the list, I don't have to go to the down list. And we're going to call this whole diameter. So we're going to just call it whole dia, because I don't want to write out diameter, but again, using bumpy case. And I'm going to call that 0.25, right? And then because we might change the size of the can, but we want the hole to stay the same. And then we're going to create one more, and we're going to call that just THK. It's only one word. We're going to use that to mean computer autocorrect. Let's make the T capitalized, and then maybe it won't try to change it on me. There we go. And we're going to make that 0.25. All right. That's just what it is already. All right. So in Onshape, now here's something you got to get your head wrapped around. So we created those variables down here in our features list, but our features list goes in order. So if I want to go back to sketch 1 and change these sizes to nominal to these variables that we just created, they have to be before, these variables have to happen before we created the sketch. So if I was creating this sketch from the beginning and I knew I was going to use variables, I would create the variable first. Okay, the only reason why we're moving things around now is because I created the variables after I created the can. Okay, so again, if we know we're going to use variables, we want to do that before we create the sketch. So since we didn't, what we're going to do is we're going to click, hold, and drag, and we're going to drag all these variables ahead of the sketch and the extrude, right? Then what we can do is we can go back in and we can edit our sketch, and instead of have this being 1.25, since our nominal size is 1.25, we're going to say nominal, and then as soon as I start to type it, it comes up, and then I'm going to use the hashtag so that it's divided by 2. All right, so because 2.5 divided by 2 is 1.25, right? So I'm going to hit that, enter, and it still stays the same, but if I double click on it, there it is, just like that. So it's always going to give me, Onshape is always going to give me the numerical value that it is. But just know that when you double click on that, and this will be divided by 2 again, when you click on that, it'll show you what you entered. So don't go freaking out because, oh my goodness, it's not, it doesn't say nominal size anymore. It does, it's just underneath everything. So this is that small radius, so we're going to say nominal size divided by 10 so that we get 2.5, right? And then because we created hole diameter as 0.25, we're just going to call this hole diameter, right? We're going to check that. And then when we go to edit our extrude, we're going to change our depth from being 0.25 to just THK for our thickness. All right, so nothing changed, right? So what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Well, if I do want to make this a little bit larger, all I have to do is come over here and double click on nominal size. It'll pull it up and I can change it to 3. And now, I mean, it's hard to tell because we don't have anything to compare it to, but now the size of everything is larger. So see, look, the radius on that arc is now 1.5. The distance between the origin point and the center point of that arc is 1.5. And look at this radius. Now it's 0.3, right? Because we had nominal size divided by 10. So now nominal size is 3 divided by 10. Now that makes that 3. So we were able to make a quick change using variables to change the size over here because we created these as mathematical expressions, right? And then we could do the same thing with our thickness. We could make that a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner, whatever we wanted to do. Let's say the hole didn't quite fit right. We can make a change just by changing that variable. All right, so that's what variables are for. That's how to create them. Remember, it's over here where plane is. Drop down, grab a variable, and then we just want to assign a number that corresponds with what we want our initial size to be. So if I'm creating a chair, I look at my overall dimensions, from my initial sketch and measurements of what it needs to be, and I would find some number that works where either all my measurements are a factor of that measurement, or I would pick a variable that is a factor of all my other sizes. All right, so hopefully that makes sense to you, and you were able to follow along. Remember, most importantly, you have to make sure that those variables show up on your features list before you start to use them. All right, guys, thanks for watching, another Hey Guys. Hopefully you liked it. If you liked it, give it the old thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe.